All right, let's dive right in. We're tackling a huge question today. Is your happiness basically a genetic lottery ticket you were handed at birth? Or is it something you can actually, build for yourself? We're going to dig into the science to see what's really in the blueprint for our well-being.
I mean, it's something we've all wondered about, right? You look at some people and they just seem to have this sunny disposition. Were they just born that way? Or is there a lot more to the story? Let's unpack the science behind that very question.
So, before we can get to the bottom of this, we really need to be clear about what we're even talking about. Because it turns out happiness isn't just one single thing. Science actually breaks it down into two very different but equally important concepts.
Okay, so on one hand, you've got what's called hedonic well-being. The easiest way to think about this is that in-the-moment joy. The pleasure you get from a fantastic meal or just laughing your head off with friends. It's all about feeling good. But then on the other hand, there's eudaimonic well-being. And this is the deeper stuff. It's about having a sense of purpose, about growth, about meaning. It's about living a good life. You got to keep these two ideas in mind because which one we're talking about totally changes the answer to our big question.
So with those two flavors of happiness in our back pocket, let's get into the role of our genes. How much of our well-being is actually written in our DNA? Well, to figure that out, we have to understand one very specific scientific term first.
And that term is heritability. Now, this is super important, so let's get this straight. Heritability does not mean the percentage of your happiness that comes from your genes. Nope. What it does is it looks at a whole population, a big group of people, and it asks, okay, why are some people here happier than others? Heritability tells us what slice of those differences between people can be chalked up to their genes. So think of it as a group stat, not your personal destiny written in stone.
And this, right here, is where it gets really fascinating. There isn't just one simple answer to how genetic is happiness. The number changes completely depending on what we're measuring. Are we talking about that in-the-moment pleasure, or our deeper, long-term satisfaction with life?
So let's start with a real shocker. The heritability of your immediate, moment-to-moment positive feelings, it's pretty much zero. That little flash of joy you get from a perfect cup of coffee or a funny text message, that's almost entirely about the situation you're in. It's a response to your world, not some preset command from your DNA.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. What about your general, overall satisfaction with your life? That deeper feeling when you step back and ask yourself, all things considered, how's it going? For that, huge studies show the heritability is somewhere around 32 to 40%. So, yeah, that's a pretty big piece of the pie, but it's definitely not the whole story.
So yeah, for your overall life satisfaction, about 40% of the difference between people comes down to genetics. But just look at the rest of that circle. That leaves a massive 60% that's shaped by your choices, your experiences, your environment. Your genes are a big factor, for sure, but they are not your destiny, not even close.
But here's the final and most stunning piece of this puzzle. If we look at the stable, the unchanging part of your well-being over many, many years, your core baseline, the heritability jumps to a massive 70 to 80%. This suggests our genes give us a kind of gravitational pull, a happiness set point that we tend to drift back to over the long run. So, we've got 0%, 40%, and 80%. What on earth do we make of all that? Well, it tells us that nature versus nurture is totally the wrong way to think about it. It's not a fight. It's much more like a partnership, a dance between your genes and your life.
The fancy scientific term for this is gene-environment interplay, and you can think of it like a two-way street. Your genetic predispositions might nudge you towards certain hobbies or careers, right? But at the exact same time, your experiences and your environment can actually turn certain genes on or off. It's this constant dynamic feedback loop.
Probably the best way to wrap your head around this is with a simple analogy. Just think of your genetic makeup as the architectural blueprint for a house.
So that genetic blueprint, it sets the potential, the number of rooms, the basic layout, that kind of thing. But everything that actually makes it a home, that's on you. Your choices, your relationships, your efforts, that's the furniture, the paint on the walls, the garden you plant out front. You see, a fantastic blueprint doesn't automatically mean it's a happy home, and a more modest one can be turned into something truly beautiful.
And this brings us right back to that idea of a genetic baseline, what's often called the set point theory. The notion that we each have this fixed level of happiness that we always bounce back to. But the latest science is asking, well, how fixed is it really? Now,
The research is crystal clear that there is a strong genetic component to our happiness baseline. No doubt about it. That stable, long-term part of our mood is heavily influenced by our genes. But that is not the end of the story.
So the real question becomes, how much wiggle room do we actually have? If our genes set a baseline, how far can our life choices and our circumstances really move the needle? As it turns out, the answer is a surprising amount.
So to figure this out, researchers did something really clever. They ran a simulation with real data, and they looked at identical twins. I mean, people who shared the exact same genetic blueprint. And what they found was wild. Even with the same genes, on average, these twins were still 5.8 points apart on a 35-point scale of life satisfaction.
Let me tell you, a 5.8-point difference on that scale is huge. That can be the difference between feeling just meh about your life and feeling genuinely happy and satisfied. So here's the absolute key takeaway. Your genes don't set a single fixed point. They create a potential range. And your life, your choices, determine where you end up living within it.
And this is incredibly empowering, isn't it? You can't change the blueprint you were given, but you have tremendous power as the architect who's actually building the house. And the science even gives us a strategy for how to build it well.
The researchers call this strategy gene-environment matchmaking, and the core idea is beautifully simple. It's about consciously building a life that works with your natural predispositions, not fighting against them.
So how do you actually do that? Well, first, amplify your strengths. Figure out what you're naturally good at, what you enjoy, and then build a life that lets you do more of that. Second, mitigate your risks. So if you know you're prone to anxiety, for example, you can actively build skills like mindfulness or create routines that give you a sense of stability. And finally, find your fit. Deliberately choose the hobbies, the career, and the people that just feel authentic to you.
So what's the ultimate takeaway from all of this? Well, our happiness has a strong genetic root, but it is not fixed. It has a stable core, but it's also incredibly changeable. And the most powerful tools you have for shaping it are the ones you control, your daily choices and the environment you create for yourself.
In the end, the science can show you your blueprint. It can show you the potential and the predispositions you were born with. But the final and most important question is the one that only you can answer. With that blueprint in your hand, how will you choose to build your life?